June 793, northern England. Monks pray in the sanctuary of Lindisfarne. Then shattering screams, smoke and blood, the invaders who unleash this terror shouldn't exist. With longships slicing at up to 15 knots through impossible seas, these Norsemen are about to redraw the limits of the known world. How did they become history's most feared seaborne raiders? This is the hidden machinery behind the true Viking story. What made their age possible and what shattered the silence first? On June 8, 793, the monastery at Lindisfarne was thrown into chaos. Shouts echoed off the stone walls as iron-clad strangers stormed through the sanctuary, cutting down monks and dragging others away in chains. The air filled with the sharp scent of smoke and spilled oil from overturned lamps. Holy books, painstakingly illuminated over years, were torn from their shelves and trampled underfoot. Gold chalices and reliquaries vanished into rough hands. For centuries, Lindisfarne had been a sanctuary, a place where the sacred was meant to be safe from the violence of the outside world. Now, blood stained the altar steps, news travelled quickly through the kingdoms of Northumbria and beyond. Alcuin of York, a respected scholar, wrote in horror, "Never before has such terror appeared in Britain as we have now suffered from a pagan race. The church of St. Cuthbert is spattered with the blood of the priests of God." The raid shattered any illusion of security. If the Holy Island could fall, nowhere was safe. The shock spread far beyond the monastery walls, leaving rulers and common folk alike to wonder who these attackers were and how they had crossed the sea to strike with such sudden force. Cold, rocky shores and deep forests shaped the people of Scandinavia long before their sails appeared on foreign horizons. In these northern lands, what we now call Norway, Sweden and Denmark, families gathered beneath steep roofs as storms lashed the coasts. Farmland was scarce, winters harsh, and communities clustered along the fjords and sheltered bays. Survival demanded resourcefulness and skill, but it also bred ambition. When the sea offered more than the land, Norse craftsmen turned their energies to wood and iron, forging something the world had never seen: the clinker-built longship. These ships were marvels of engineering. Oak planks split along the grain and overlapped like scales, were riveted together to create a hull that flexed with the waves. The shallow draft, sometimes just 1 metre deep, let these vessels glide up rivers and over sandbanks where no other warship could follow. A longship under sail could outrun most pursuers, reaching speeds of 10 to 15 knots. When the wind died, teams of rowers kept the pace, each oar biting into the water in perfect rhythm. Archaeological finds such as the Oseberg and Gokstad ships, buried in Norway in the 9th century, reveal the full artistry of these builders. The Oseberg ship, over 21 metres long, was built not just for speed but for ceremony, its prow carved with curling beasts. The Gokstad ship, slightly larger, shows refinements for both open sea and river travel. Both could be hauled ashore by hand, their light frames strong enough to cross the North Sea, yet nimble enough for sudden landings. With these ships, the Norse were no longer bound by geography. The world's coastlines, rivers and distant islands became open to them, and no shore was beyond their reach. By the mid-9th century, Norse ambitions pressed hard against the shores of England. Raiding bands gave way to armies, none larger than the Great Heathen Army that landed in 865. Over the next 13 years, they captured city after city, York, Nottingham and London, forcing local kings to pay tribute or flee. In 878, after years of brutal fighting, King Alfred of Wessex met the Viking leader Guthrum at Wedmore. The agreement that followed split England, granting the Norse control of the Danelaw, a swath of territory stretching from the Thames to the Humber. Here, Norse law and language mingled with Anglo-Saxon customs, reshaping daily life and governance. Across the Channel, Viking ships prowled the Seine, threatening Paris and the Frankish heartlands. In the year 911, the Frankish king Charles the Simple turned to negotiation. He offered the Viking chieftain Rollo land in exchange for peace and defence against future raids. Rollo accepted, swearing fealty and converting to Christianity. The land grant became known as Normandy, the land of the Northmen. Within a generation, Rollo's descendants adopted Frankish customs and language, but kept their fierce independence. These settlements, born from violence and diplomacy, set the stage for new hybrid societies that would later shape the fate of Europe. East of the Baltic, Norse ambitions followed the great rivers south, carving new routes through dense forests and open steppe. Swedish warriors and traders, known as Varangians, navigated the Volga and Dnieper, linking the cold waters of Scandinavia to the markets of Byzantium and the Abbasid Caliphate. By the late 9th century, fortified settlements like Novgorod and Kiev rose along these riverways, blending Norse leadership with Slavic populations. The primary chronicle recounts the arrival of Rurik and his kin, considered founders of the Kievan Rus. Silver coins from Samara, silks from Constantinople, and furs from the north flowed through these towns, evidence of a network that spanned continents. Some Norsemen, drawn by the promise of wealth and adventure, entered the service of the Byzantine emperors. The Varangian Guard became famous for their loyalty and ferocity, wielding heavy axes in the heart of imperial power. Among them was Harald Hardrada, a Norwegian prince whose years in Constantinople forged him into a seasoned commander. His journey from the rivers of the Rus to the marble halls of Byzantium set the stage for his later claim to the Norwegian throne, and for the final act of the Viking Age in England. Wind and salt spray carried Norse ambitions beyond Europe's shores. Around 874, settlers from Norway reached Iceland, drawn by tales of unclaimed land and freedom from chieftain feuds. Here, beneath volcanic peaks and endless sky, they built turf-walled homes and founded the Althing in 930, the oldest surviving parliament in the world. The sagas remember these first families, their struggles with ash-dark winters and the promise of new beginnings. Further west, Eric the Red, exiled for blood feuds, sailed into the ice-laced waters of Greenland in 982. He named the land to lure others, and for centuries Norse farms clung to the fjords, raising sheep and cattle where glaciers met the sea. But the Norse hunger for discovery did not stop. Around the year 1000, Leif Erikson, Eric's son, sailed even further, landing in a place the sagas called Vinland. Archaeological remains at Lansode Meadows in Newfoundland confirm Norse presence in North America, with sod-walled houses and iron nails left behind. For the Vikings, the world had no edge, only new frontiers. Silver coins from distant Samara, glass beads from Byzantium, and bolts of silk once shimmered on the wooden stalls of Birka and Hedeby. These towns, rising along the shores of Lake Mälaren and the Danish borderlands, became crossroads where Norse traders met merchants from the Islamic world, the Baltic, and the far south. Archaeologists have uncovered hoards of Abbasid dirhams, thousands of silver coins buried for safekeeping in the soil of Gotland and Sweden. The Spillings hoard alone, unearthed in 1999, yielded over 14,000 dirhams, each stamped with Arabic script and proof of a network stretching more than 3,000 kilometres. Furs, walrus ivory, amber and slaves moved south in exchange for silver, glass and fine cloth. In the crowded markets, Norse craftsmen hammered out jewellery, weighed foreign coins and bartered for luxury goods that would travel home in the holds of longships. Viking wealth was built as much on trade as on the sword. Power in Norse society rested with the Jarls, noble leaders who commanded ships and land. Carls, free farmers, craftsmen and traders formed the backbone of daily life, while thralls, often captured in raids or born to bondage, worked the fields and homes. Yet the law shaped every tier. Free men gathered at the Thing, open-air assemblies where disputes were judged and new laws declared. The Gragas, Iceland's ancient law code, preserves the voices of these gatherings, echoing a society that weighed justice in public. Women held rights rare for their age. They could own land, inherit and divorce, while keeping their dowries. The grave of Birka BJ, chapter 581, a warrior buried with weapons and horses, was revealed by DNA to be female, fueling debate over shield maidens. Above all, belief in Odin and Thor shaped their world. To die bravely was to reach Valhalla, feasting and fighting until the world's end. Dawn broke over the fields near Stamford Bridge on September the 25th, 1066. Norwegian banners snapped in the wind as Harald Hardrada's army, fresh from victory at Fulford, rested in the late summer sun. Many warriors had left their mail behind on the far side of the river, confident no foe would reach them so soon. Then, from the south, dust rose. King Harold Godwinson's English host had marched over 180 miles in just 4 days, and now closed in at speed. The Norwegians scrambled for weapons as English troops surged across the narrow bridge, bottlenecking the advance. Chronicle writers tell of a single Norseman holding the crossing, swinging his axe until he fell under a spear thrust from beneath the planks. Once the bridge was cleared, the English pressed hard. Outnumbered and unarmoured, the Norwegians formed a shield wall, but discipline broke under the relentless assault. Amid the chaos, Harald Hardrada was struck down by an arrow to the throat. By evening, the Norwegian army was shattered. Few would return home. The age of open Viking conquest had ended on the banks of the Derwent. Across continents, Viking DNA still shapes millions today. Proof that no civilization's story ends at the battlefield. As migration and identity debates rage, their legacy reminds us borders shift, but the drive to explore, adapt and connect endures. History's ripples never truly fade. Share your thoughts below.